So this is my moving day morning face. Still looking more alive than I felt. Tiny bit exhausted. So this is on the ferry. We got one of the U-Haul trucks with a bat, which is awesome. And yeah, it's been a bit of a trip. Almost 7,000 kilometers across all of Canada. And at that point, I was just glad to be in the truck because it was crazy. I had to work insane hours to pre-make enough videos to have a backlog for the time during the move when I wouldn't get anything done. And the move itself, packing and everything, it was tiring to say the least. So British Columbia, of course, is known for its landscape. The license plates say beautiful British Columbia, and it's not an overstatement. So you got all the mountains and very different landscapes too. I mean, here you can see this change drastically. This is kind of Wild West-esque. And in fact, in this town where we stayed overnight, Merritt, there was actually a rodeo going on at the time. So, yeah, yeehaw. Alright, we stayed overnight in Merritt and now it's onward to Calgary. So driving through BC is kind of like crossing different biomes in Minecraft. You can definitely see substantial differences between the areas. You have anything from flat to extremely steep mountains. Driving in BC, especially a truck like that, is a little bit stressful, because you have lots of narrow, winding roads and plenty of up and down and just rather crazy. So here we're driving toward the Banff National Park. It was still a little further ahead. At one point there was a black bear on the road and no fluffs given. It was just standing there middle of the road, forcing another car and us to stop in front of it. And the bear was just looking at us like, hey, what's up? And it was just leisurely trotting along. Yeah, you see, this is just gorgeous, breathtaking view, especially with the clouds there, surrounding the peaks. It was, this was not so beautiful, driving right through a hailstorm. You can't even see the worst of it here. At one point, it was so bad that the hail came down like crazy, and the road was essentially just white with hail, and everything was slowing down. It was insane. It was a stressful drive for sure. But there we're out. You can see the sign, Banff there. And that's a very well-known national park for good reason. It is stunning. And it is both in British Columbia and Alberta, which is why the roads are very well maintained there. Because it's, of course, a touristy area, and both provinces have an interest in it. So this was very, very nice to look at. Just not the greatest to drive, especially considering that the gas prices are highest in BC, and this is also where the driving was the most demanding, with steep inclines and all that. Anyway, so we stayed overnight in Calgary at Blargady's place, one of my patrons, who was a very gracious host, who let us stay there overnight and supplied us with bread and cake, and it was awesome. He's a cool guy. Definitely enjoyed the stay there. So here we're driving through Alberta, and yeah, it's quite the opposite of the previous parts of BC that we drove through. This is all flat, completely flat. It's all farmland, and not that much to see really, but it was great to drive because you could drive fast here even with a truck. It's super easy. And, I'd think it's boring as hell, but it was okay, actually, because it's kind of nice to have this grand overview. You can see everything all the way to the horizon, so it's still kind of cool. And the sky was looking amazing. All right, it's day 3, and we're in Medicine Hat now. Very interesting landscape. This is where I would expect hobbits to live, or hill dwarves. Pretty cool. I did enjoy all the hills. They look kind of like Scotland, doesn't it? So that was kind of neat. Moose Jaw, the friendly city. Okay then. Definitely one of the most amusing place names we came across, but wasn't really a terribly remarkable place. This is basically what you see is what you get. Saskatchewan has been excessively windy. It's all this plains, nothing to break the wind. It's pretty. All just hills and wide plains, and this is what you have long hair for, to stand heroically in the wind. Ha! And onwards. Saskatchewan. Very, very flat. Considered by many to be a sort of flyover province, just like Manitoba. A lot of agriculture going on there. Not particularly distinctive, aside from how flat it is. But it was nice to drive through. Definitely. I do like this view up to the horizon. It's pretty cool. Alright, so now we're in a hotel just out of Regina, and just saw in the news that there's a hurricane coming up, the one that's wrecking the Bahamas right now, which is going to travel up and go right past Nova Scotia, and it's going to hit there basically when we arrive, so yay.
Welcome committee!
Yeah, basically. But shouldn't be too bad anymore at that point because it's off the coast and it's only 140 kilometers an hour, winds and rains and well. Coffee.
His Lord and Savior.
And then we entered Manitoba, which, as you can see, not quite as flat, and a little bit different landscape. You have some trees, which were mostly absent in Saskatchewan. We didn't drive through any of the big cities. You know, we didn't come through Winnipeg. I actually said Winnipeg. It is Winnipeg, but a lot of people call it Winterpeg for, well, obvious reasons. They get a lot of snow. And, yeah, also just passed by Regina. Yes, it is Regina. And it was certainly interesting to see the differences in vegetation as you drive along. But I wish the U-Haul trucks were a little more comfortable. Sitting in that for 10 hours is not fantastic. It's not exactly what I call comfort. Alright, so we drove through most of Manitoba today and ended up in West Hawk Lake at a motel. I guess my European origin is showing because when I walked into that place, I was like, this is the most American thing I've ever seen, I've ever walked into. You know, the kind of stuff that you usually see in movies where they have, you know, the fishing supplies and the food and snacks and rental movies in one corner, actual rental movies. And just the way it's laid out and the way it's built and everything is just, it has a very, very kind of, I don't know, survival game slash road movie sort of feel. And I love this because it's really quiet. I mean, there's the AC or whatever going over there, but aside from the sounds from the buildings here, it's dead quiet. I love it. This is like introvert's paradise. So I think this will be a good night's sleep. And then tomorrow it's going to be off into Ontario. Pretty sure we'll need 2 days for that. Ontario is large. Yep, there you can see it from the outside. Keystone Resort is pretty nice. I enjoyed the stay there. If you ever come through that, I can recommend it. That was pretty neat. Pretty decent prices too, so can't complain. And after a lot of driving and more driving, we entered Ontario, which has some peculiarities about it. And among other things, we found a place where I would not want to stay overnight. Don't mind us, Jason, just passing through. Coming through Dryden. Not the most appealing looking kind of place. Very industrial, sort of trashy looking.
Hallelujah! There is the one fucking station they probably have.
One gas station, yes.
But they do tell me to check my tank.
Yeah. Yeah, would not want to stay here.
No.
And we won't. The most unappealing part about Dryden you can't tell from the video, and that was the smell. There was a pulp mill, and it was disgusting. If you've ever smelled a pulp mill, you know what I'm talking about. It's gross, and the air quality was just terrible. Yeah, just pass through, just stop to get some gas, and that's it. So, Northern Ontario. I think I now understand why some people call it unterrible. For one, the speed limit is 90, which is a little ridiculous on the highways. And also, everything is just regulate. Like, it seems like somebody's German grandma regulated everything. Like, it's designed to be inconvenient and just to slow you down and everything. Like, for example, there's plenty of highways with a single lane, and where there was an extra lane for overtaking, it was almost always uphill, which is not really great for, accelerating to overtake someone. Parts of Northern Ontario felt very remote and kind of run down and just not super hospitable. The landscape in some places was gorgeous, and others kind of on the boring side. It was definitely a mixed bag. Now, I'm pretty sure Southern Ontario would be a lot different, because that's where you have Toronto and Ottawa. That's where all the big city life is, etc. So, but yeah, we drove a lot to just get through it, basically. There's 12 hours, just keep going. But we also encountered a place name that I very much approve of. Okay, we're now in Cochrane, Ontario, and I haven't recorded in a while because I got poisoned in Nipigon at a questionable diner, which actually had a sign on the entrance saying food quality A. I can only assume the A stands for ass. So, yeah, that wasn't great. Food poisoning is not something you want on the road, but at least this was only the stomach ache and nausea and fever type, so could have been worse. But yeah, we just want to get out of Ontario at this point. It's oddly enough, it's Northern Ontario at least has been the least friendly of the provinces. There's something about it, and Nipigon in particular gave off unfriendly vibes. Maybe it's just when you pass through, but there's something about that place. Yeah, so we just want to get out of it. Just want to hit Quebec now, and then New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, and then we're finally there. How excited are you two?
Whee!
Whee! Whee! Yeah, the food on the way was not great. Particularly Nipigon gave me all kinds of suspicious vibes anyway. And yeah, that was not fun to have a fever and be violently nauseated, but not being able to throw up.
Quebec! Hello!
Anyway, so then we were in Quebec. And it apparently annoys French speakers when you say Quebec. It is Quebec. But this was a bit of a culture shock, I guess. Just suddenly being in the French-speaking part of Canada, where English is not really a thing. I mean, people generally speak English, at least broken English, but it was odd. It looked nice though, landscape-wise, and the towns and cities. Overall, it seemed a little more urban in parts of it, and kind of more connected, if you will, like kind of more places, and looked a little more alive. I remember what we came up with when driving through Northern Ontario is we got the feeling that it had a bit of a given up vibe. Like people were just like, whatever, screw it. This is very subjective, of course, and it's just from driving through without actually talking to people, aside from gas stations and restaurants and whatnot. So it was very subjective, but that's kind of the feel that we got. And then the storm caught up to us again. It got pretty bad at times, and driving a truck at night in the dark, in the rain and storm is not fantastic. But yeah, at least the drivers weren't as insane here as the pickup drivers in BC. Like literally the worst drivers ever are pickup drivers in British Columbia, I swear. Okay, we've arrived in Saint Adèle, and this is quite a nice motel room. And this was one hell of a drive. Apparently the hurricane was noticeable. I mean the outer rainfall. Yeah, the outer range of it. It was not full on hurricane, but it was the rainfall was definitely like it. And in the night and on horrible roads and all kinds of things. So basically, Quebec has terrible roads comparable to parts of Quebec.
The back roads of
the back roads, yeah, fair enough.
The moment we got anywhere close,
you're getting close to Montreal, it changes for sure.
Great roads.
Yeah.
Yes.
The people seem a lot more inviting here than they did in Northern Ontario, so that's good. Overall, it seems a little more inviting and interesting. Although it was kind of weird to suddenly be in French country. Like, I'm not used to not understanding people at all. Like, I can't even pick up individual words. They speak way too quick, and my French is too rusty. And everything is in French. There's no English translations anywhere. So that was kind of weird. But yeah, we're there now for the night. And tomorrow we'll get through Montreal and leave Quebec and penetrate into New Brunswick, and then the day after we should arrive in Nova Scotia. Yay! So much fun. And then we hit Montreal. We couldn't drive completely around it, so we kind of passed through the outskirts, and yeah, traffic was bad for a time. Very, very dense. And lots of crazy drivers, like reckless, like death wish kind of drivers, A lot of people don't understand that maybe you don't want to shear in front of a heavy truck, like super close, because the thing can push you off the damn road. And then we passed this bridge here twice because signs over there are confusing. Like really confusing. There's way too many of them, and they are not entirely clear. So yeah, it was a nice bridge, but we weren't actually supposed to go across it, so we had to turn and then go back. Anyway, and then we were slowly making our way toward New Brunswick, and I was glad at that point because, as I said, it was a little bit alienating to be surrounded by French. Not that I have any problem with French, aside from its grammar. Like, French grammar, just screw it. But, yeah, it's not a language that I'm fluent in, and that felt kind of weird. But, yeah, overall, Quebec was fairly nice to drive through, aside from the language thing. And the storm, but that was not Quebec's fault. That was Dorian's fault. More and more driving. At this point, the roads were also substantially better. Before Montreal, the roads were in absolutely terrible condition. Potholes and rumbly, and then like the truck jumped a number of times. I'm not sure if it was worse than Manitoba, or as I like to call Rumbly-toba, but pretty bad too.
There we go.
Hey.
New Brunswick.
Second to last.
Almost there.
Yep. Penultimate. There we go.
Oh, this pizza, yes. Grand Falls, New Brunswick. Pizza Greco. They will get you your noms. Another place didn't because the weather was too bad. But these guys, oh yeah, they saved us. Because after driving the whole day, pretty damn ravenous. The hurricane has been sweeping through Nova Scotia, and there's power outages, which our new place may or may not be affected by. There are outages in that area. Yeah, great. That's one way to question, was it really a good idea to move out here? I mean, every province has its things, but Vancouver Island is actually very safe in terms of harsh weather and natural disasters and things like that. So, well, we'll see how bad it is when we get there. It's passed through now, so we'll just see if there's any damage in the area. Halifax got some, and there's almost 380,000 people without power in Nova Scotia right now. Great thing to arrive to, but we'll see. New Brunswick was basically uneventful. The landscape looked mostly like this, and there was nothing crazy going on. The roads were in good condition, and the drivers were reasonable, and just nothing much to report really. It was a pretty smooth drive. At that point, it almost felt like we would never arrive, being on the road for that long. We've never done a trip that long, like 8 or 9 days. Or I think on the 9th day we arrived early. So, yeah, it was a little bit exhausting. There's something, I don't really know why it's exhausting, because you're just sitting. But just sitting for so many hours is draining. I can't even say why, but yeah, it just is. But the rough parts were behind us, and the roughest obviously being British Columbia with the mountain driving.
There we are.
Finally!
Nova Scotia.
Yes! Hooray!
Yeah, seeing that sign was awesome. Like, yes, we finally entered the province of our destination. It was still another 6 hours of driving from there, but at least the end was in sight. Got lots of wind turbines there, for good reason. I mean, I was actually surprised to not see a whole lot of wind turbines in Saskatchewan, because it's all open, it's flat, it's windy as hell, so that would make a lot of sense, but oh well. I don't make the decisions like that. Yep, this is Nova Scotia. And finally.
We did it! We're home!
I did it. And then, of course, the unpacking. We've been extremely busy for the past, week and a half or so, and it continues to be busy. There's so much to do here. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching, and have a good one, folks.